The first scene of the film depicts a handsome man trying to seize a beautiful woman. They make their way to a dimly lit alley where he parks the vehicle. This is followed by the two of them leaving together. Even after the morning has arrived, the automobile is still parked in the alley. A police car draws attention to the abandoned vehicle and inquires of a man who is hunched under an umbrella whether or not the vehicle is his. Under his breath, the man, who is known as Mr. Pimp, utters a curse and whispers that he would kill the girl as soon as he discovers her. As it turns out, Mr. Pimp is a pimp who is currently experiencing difficulties due to the fact that two of his females have inexplicably disappeared. However, despite his abundance of hormones, he is currently in a limited financial position. He begs someone on the phone to hold off until he is able to accumulate sufficient funds to pay him. After a few moments have passed, his phone rings once more. At the moment, it is a client who is placing an order for one of his prostitutes. As a result, Mr. Pimp dispatches a street lady to the hotel room of the customer. When she finally gets inside, however, she finds out that there is another man hidden in the bathroom, and he is taking photographs of them in secret. The street girl becomes enraged and refers to the customer as a pervert with a name. Subsequently, she leaves the motel room, but the patron approaches her and assaults her for referring to him as a pervert. Because of this, there is a disturbance at the motel, and Mr. Pimp goes there to save the girl who was living on the street. In order to coerce the consumer into paying, he hits him and threatens him. After that, he goes to the street girl, who tells him that she is going to stop working as a prostitute. It was earlier observed by the cops that Mr. Pimp provided her with a ride in the abandoned car. The street girl is troubled by the recent string of disappearances that have occurred at Mr. Pimp's brothel, and she reprimands him for not carrying out additional efforts to locate the two girls who have gone missing. Considering that Mr. Pimp was a former investigator, it is possible that he may still make use of his connections in order to look for answers. However, he disregards his suspicions and asserts that the girls were either victims of human trafficking or that they fled with the financial advance that he had provided to them prior to meeting with a possible client. His assistant contacts him since he does not have any more ladies to send to a client. Mr. Pimp is unable to send any more girls. The girl named Beauty is the one who Mr. Pimp instructs him to send instead. However, it appears that she is ill with a cold. Mr. Pimp believes that she is merely acting, and because she is able to get off work, he makes her go to the client's house. While Mr. Pimp is in his office, he comes to the realization that the client that Beauty is scheduled to meet with that evening is the same individual who was the latter of his two missing ladies' clients. Immediately, he phones Beauty and instructs her to send him a text message with the client's address when they get at his residence. Following the delivery of his directives to Beauty, he phones his old acquaintance, who was also a member of the police force in the past, and he calls him Police Fluffy. He is informed by Mr. Pimp that he has a lead on the females who have gone missing, and he requests that the police be dispatched to the address. But the police, after someone throws smelly shit at the face of the mayor during a demonstration, Fluffy is assigned to be a part of the mayor's security detail. Meanwhile, the spooky customer, who goes by the nickname Mr. Creepy, meets Beauty, and the two of them travel to his residence in her vehicle. In the course of their journey, They go through the same alley where the car was left behind. When they get to his property, she discovers that there is a hole in the garden that has been recently filled in. She stealthily makes her way to the filthy restroom in order to convey the message to Mr. Pimp. On the other hand, she was unable to transmit it because there was no cellular coverage in the restroom. Beauty is becoming more and more uneasy, and she makes an attempt to open the window in the bathroom, only to discover that there is a brick wall to the side of it. Following that, she discovers a number of clumps of long hair in the bathtub. Mr. Creepy is informed by her that she has forgotten something in her vehicle. However, he has already shut the gate. There is no escape route available to her. On the other hand, Mr. Pimp is only familiar with the client's neighborhood. Hence, he travels to that location and waits for Beauty to get in touch with him. But she has not communicated with him, and he is unable to get in touch with her either. Once they are back inside the house, Mr. Creepy ties Beauty up and he come in with his tools of psychopathic entertainment and says that he was the one who murdered the 2 prostitutes that went missing. Then, he starts chiseling her head, but injures himself. And in rage, he throws a hammer to her head, which causes her to pass out. However, he is interrupted by an elderly couple who are at the property looking for the person who actually owns it. The proprietor is a member of their congregation, and they are curious as to why he has not been attending the church in recent times. When they notice that the proprietor's dog is present, they begin to have doubts about Mr. Creepy. The couple is quickly eliminated by Mr. Creepy, who then exits their vehicle in order to conceal it in a hidden location. As a result of a strange turn of events, Mr. Pimp's car collides with the vehicle. Creepy is behind the wheel. He exits the vehicle and inquires about Mr. Creepy's phone number in order to make a payment for the damages. However, he suddenly becomes aware of the blood that is on Mr. Creepy's clothing. As Mr. Pimp dials the client's number, Mr. Creepy's phone rings, which serves as further evidence. In spite of his attempts to flee, Mr. Pimp continues to pursue him through the streets. He encircles him, and the two of them engage in a tense and ferocious altercation. If you are liking the recap, do subscribe. A thumbs up would really boost our confidence, and we can bring you more such thrilling movie scenes. They are both taken to the station after being arrested by the local police officers. Mr. Creepy tells lies about his telephone and the people who own the car once he is taken into custody. Police officers put pressure on him to provide information about Mr. Pimp's prostitutes. But Mr. Creepy readily admits to being responsible for the deaths of 9 people. In the meantime, the individual who threw poo at the mayor has been captured by the Fluffy Police Department. He then comes to the conclusion that Mr. Creepy is the murderer, responsible for the several unsolved murder cases in the district. Mr. Pimp calls him about Mr. Creepy's confession. He then goes to the police station and claims that he will bring Mr. Creepy in, but the local police officers argue with him about what to do with the suspect. In the end, Police Fluffy is the one who gets first dibs. Therefore, he gives the order for Mr. Pimp to report to their station. While Mr. Creepy is in the car with Police Fluffy and his partner, he divulges the information that he used a chisel to kill his victims, and that Beauty is still alive. Mr. Pimp searches the car that Mr. Creepy stole, and sees his keys lying on the floor. He orders his assistant to go around the district, and find the house that the keys can open. He then visits the home of the elderly couple, who owns the car, and talks to their housekeeper, who hasn't seen them since earlier that day. He notices that the couple has a calendar from the local church. Mr. Creepy is transported to the station operated by police Fluffy in order to be fingerprinted and questioned. Back at the police station, Creepy creeps out the female cop, warns police Fluffy that he hammers a chisel into the brains of his victims, then hangs their bodies and slices them into bits before burying them. However, when queried about where he buried them, he becomes flippant. In addition, Mr. Pimp goes to the station. However, his primary objective is to locate Beauty. He is very clear that he does not believe that Mr. Creepy was responsible for the deaths of his girls. Yet the police, according to Fluffy, they need at the very least obtain DNA samples from Beauty in order to compare them to the blood that was found on Mr. Creepy's clothing. Almost immediately after that, Mr. Pimp visits Beauty's apartment with a DNA technician, and he discovers Beauty's daughter being held there. As she is the only person she has, Mr. Pimp decides to take her with him. It is him who pays a visit to Mr. Creepy's sister and nephew-in-law. On the other hand, they assert that they had not seen Mr. Creepy for a number of years, ever since the sister left him alone with her son and returned in a state of shock to discover that Mr. Creepy had used a chisel to inflict facial injuries on her son. The interrogation, on the other hand, is still going on. But Mr. Creepy continues to refuse to provide the location of the graves where the dead were buried. There is insufficient information to construct a case against Mr. Creepy because he does not have an address or geographical location. To add insult to injury, he had previously been detained in connection with a murder investigation. However, the prosecutors swiftly freed him due to the absence of any evidence. In the following step, the chief of police gives orders to his team to search the adjacent mountain for the dead. On the other hand, the police squad finds no evidence of any burials on the mountain after conducting a comprehensive search. Mr. Pimp visits a massage business that sells women to a male clientele in addition to providing massage services. The pimps there are compelled to check their records to determine whether or not Mr. Creepy has ever been a client of theirs. It has been revealed by the pimp there that Mr. Creepy was a client at one point, and the female who was supposed to be with him has also vanished. During the course of his quest, Mr. Pimp comes upon a prostitute who had previously provided services to Mr. Creepy. She claims that he is unable to have sexual relations with her, and that he started to become infatuated with her after they spent the night together. She also claims that he has sent her some frightening photographs. Immediately after that, the helper locates a small room that can be accessed by using one of the included keys. A short while later, Mr. Pimp arrives there, but he discovers that there is no trace of Beauty there. Instead, they discover a man who is residing in that location. It is revealed that he was Mr. Creepy's cellmate in prison in the past, and he stays at his apartment for a couple of weeks despite this revelation. Mr. Pimp also notices that Mr. Creepy has drawn religious symbols all over the walls, and each of these drawings is depicted in a shocking manner. Despite the fact that Beauty's kid is left behind in the car, she notices a woman who appears to be her mother, and she decides to follow her. However, she is involved in an accident, and shortly after that, Mr. Pimp locates her and takes her to the hospital as quickly as possible. When Mr. Creepy returns to the station, he is confronted by an official interrogator who implies that he is unable to have sexual relations. When Mr. Creepy becomes enraged, he assaults him. Time is running out for the police. They need to locate proof as quickly as possible. Otherwise, they will have to release the suspect. Police is currently focusing his efforts on the district, which is the location where Mr. Creepy was taken into custody. Ever since the crisis that occurred after the mayor was attacked by stinking excrement, they are in dire need of some nice public relations buzz. When Mr. Pimp arrives at the station, he assaults Mr. Creepy in order to obtain information from him regarding the location of the dead. It is fortunate that Mr. Creepy provides them with an address. Nevertheless, Mr. Pimp believes that he provided them with a false location because it is too far away from the alley where he parked the car. The other police officers allow him to do this because they are in desperate need of a lead. While this is going on, the prosecutor notices that Mr. Creepy has been injured, and he gives the order to the police to release him from their custody and to cease the continuous search for evidence. Additionally, he wants that Mr. Pimp be taken into custody for violence against Mr. Creepy. As soon as Mr. Pimp receives the news, he goes absolutely crazy, and his former co-workers had to bring him back under control. While he is driving, he reflects about his time spent working for the police department many years ago in a sarcastic manner. He mocks the driver for making money off of illicit agreements in the same way that he did, yet Mr. Pimp was the only one who was terminated from his position. After that, he assaults the driver, which ultimately results in the vehicle crashing. He manages to evade capture with the assistance of a friendly former co-worker who provides him with a key to his handcuffs. In a different part of the mansion, Beauty is able to regain consciousness and break free from the ropes that were holding her captive. Additionally, the decomposing bodies of the old couple that Mr. Creepy murdered can be found in the restroom. As she flees the house, she is covered in blood and confused, and she makes a beeline for a convenience store. The owner of the store conceals her and then contacts the authorities. Beauty also contacts Mr. Pimp's phone, but Mr. Pimp rushing around the city to accept his call. The proprietor of the store informs him that the girl who was hurt is present and requests him to remain inside the store in order to protect them in the event that the murderer arrives. However, the proprietor is unaware that Mr. Creepy is the actual murderer. She offers him a hammer, which he then uses to kill her, and then Beauty is killed by him. The scene is captivating and thrilling, showcasing the hunter hunting, the prey suffering, and the protectors still waiting for the hunt to happen. When Mr. Pimp finally makes it to the neighborhood, he arrives just in time to observe the police cordoning off the area where the crime took place. The news that Beauty has been murdered causes him to experience a great deal of distress. Following his return to his residence, Mr. Creepy places Beauty's severed head and hands in an aquarium. After that, he kills the dog and buries the remains of the old couple they had been living with in the garden. Mr. Pimp returns to the cellmate's room and listens to Beauty's final voicemail for him. Beauty had informed him that she wanted to leave her profession as a prostitute because she found it to be too terrifying. During the phone call, she had shed tears, and Mr. Pimp was overcome with emotion. After that, he comes across the same calendar at the local church, and he makes the decision to go there. He comes to the realization that the religious imagery that Mr. Creepy had sketched on the walls was an exact match for the stone carving of Jesus Christ that was located on the construction of the church. The deacon is asked if he is familiar with Mr. Creepy after he enters the building. In response, the deacon explains that he is the aide of a wealthy individual who remodeled the church. The man who owns the house that Mr. Creepy currently resides in is the same man who the elderly couple had come to visit. It would appear that Mr. Creepy must have murdered his former boss and occupied his house while committing his gruesome crimes in the neighborhood. Mr. Pimp obtains the address from the deacon, and he uses the keys that he discovered in the car to open the gate. Right at that moment, he runs into Mr. Creepy, and the two of them get into a heated fight. Both of them sustain serious injuries, and Mr. Pimp emerges victorious throughout the conflict. It is just as he is ready to strike Mr. Creepy a killing blow that he bludgeons him with a hammer. At that moment, police Fluffy and the other officers burst into the house. Exactly in the nick of time, Fluffy prevents Mr. Pimp from killing Mr. Creepy. The bodies of all of Mr. Creepy's victims, which have been buried somewhere in the front yard of the house, are eventually unearthed by the police, one by one. The movie concludes with a bleeding Mr. Pimp paying a visit to Beauty's daughter, who was being treated in the hospital, and sitting down next to her. This is the moment when Beauty and his other girls finally receive justice.